You know, there's a part of the diplomatic world that most of us completely overlook, but it's absolutely essential. It's the consulate. We might picture some dusty, forgotten office, but in reality, it's your country's front line when you're abroad. And sometimes it's a genuine lifeline. I mean, just imagine it for a second. You're in a totally foreign country, your wallet's gone, your passport's missing, or worse, you're in some kind of real trouble. Who is the one phone call you're going to make? The answer, every single time, is your country's consulate. They are the emergency service for citizens far from home. So to really get a handle on this vital service, we're going to take a journey. We'll start with its chaotic beginnings in medieval seaports, walk through its long-running feud with the high and mighty diplomatic service, and bring it right up to the high-tech, high-stress reality of the modern consulate, and take a peek at what the future holds. All right, so before we dive into all the drama and the crazy history, let's just get one thing straight. What is a consulate, really? Okay, so a consulate is basically your country's office in a foreign city, and it's not the embassy. The embassy is in the capital, dealing with all the big picture political stuff. Consulates are spread out across the country, and they focus on the practical, on-the-ground needs of citizens and businesses. You can kind of think of it as a pyramid, with smaller vice consulates and then bigger, more important consulates-general in major cities. To really understand the soul of the consul, we have to go way back in time. And their origins aren't in some fancy, refined royal court. Oh no, they're in the rough-and-tumble, chaotic world of medieval trade and port city mayhem. What's just wild is how ancient this idea is. The very first consuls were appointed by Italian merchants way back in the 1100s. That's a full 300 years before the first resident embassy even existed. It then took centuries for states to finally step in, take control, and turn these private business reps into the public servants we think of today. This quote right here just paints the perfect picture. I mean, you can just imagine a medieval port, right? You've got intense competition, totally different laws and religions, and then you have these sailors who, to put it mildly, were really letting off some steam. Somebody had to keep things from falling apart, and that somebody was the consul. And here is the absolute key difference. The original consul was not a political representative. They were a problem solver. They were a local merchant picked by their buddies to act as a judge and a spokesperson for their little trading community. They weren't even paid by a government. They were funded by a small tax on all the goods being traded. So you've got this very practical, very middle-class origin, right? Well, that created this massive, massive culture clash. For centuries, the consular service was completely looked down on by the aristocratic diplomatic service. It was actually known as the Cinderella service. I mean, just look at this. They were living in two completely different universes. The diplomats, they were aristocrats, hanging out in royal courts, skilled in high society. The consuls, they were middle-class guys working in grubby, chaotic seaports, where business savvy and common sense mattered way more than fancy manners. You can just feel the tension, can't you? The diplomats thought they were superior, and the consuls, well, they deeply resented being treated like second-class citizens. And get this, even today, long after the services were finally merged, some key legal differences are still on the books. Now, you don't need to squint and read all this fine print. The big takeaway is this. A diplomat usually has full immunity from the local laws, even for things they do in their private life. A consul, on the other hand, they typically only have immunity for their official duties. It's a subtle difference, but it's a powerful one that shows that even in international law, the two roles are still seen as fundamentally different. Over time, the consuls fought back. I mean, they were tired of their second-class status, and the lines between their work and the diplomats' work started getting blurry anyway. Finally, in the 20th century, they won. They fought for and got the two services merged. The US did it in 1924, Britain followed in 43, and one by one other countries did the same, creating a single, unified foreign service where, at least in theory, a humble consul could one day rise to become a top ambassador. Okay, so let's fast forward to today. What does a consul actually do now? Well, the job has completely transformed from managing trade to managing human crises, often on a massive scale. It's really all about a huge shift in priorities. With the absolute explosion in global travel and the huge number of people now living and working abroad, the top priority isn't commerce anymore. It's about dealing with the endless, complex, and sometimes tragic human problems that happen when millions of your citizens are scattered all over the world. So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Well, their number one job, by far, is helping citizens in distress. We're talking everything from a lost passport to a serious accident, a violent crime, or even a natural disaster. Then there's managing visa applications, which is a huge deal. They also handle the routine stuff like passport renewals, and in the most extreme cases, they coordinate massive evacuations during a crisis. And this work, well, it can get incredibly grim and just emotionally draining. This story here is a pretty stark reminder. One British vice consul in Bangkok was known by the locals as the Death Man because a major part of his job was dealing with the deaths of British citizens, identifying bodies, and making arrangements. And if dealing with that kind of tragedy wasn't stressful enough, you also have to deal with the ugly side of tourism. Back in 1998, the British vice consul in Ibiza actually resigned. He was so disgusted with the behavior of badly behaved tourists. It just goes to show you the immense pressure and frustration that can come with this job. So it's pretty clear this is a really tough, really varied job. So who are the people actually doing it? Well, the modern consular network is a fascinating mix of two very different kinds of people. First, you've got your career consuls. These are your full-time foreign service officers. But here's where it gets weird. The old structure, that classic pyramid with lots of junior positions at the bottom, it's completely flipped on its head. Today, there are way more high-level consulates-general and very, very few of the junior vice consulates. And that creates this huge problem, right? Who fills in all those gaps? How can a country possibly help its citizens in smaller cities or more remote areas? Well, the answer is the secret weapon of the modern consular network, the honorary consul. So what is an honorary consul? Usually, they're a citizen of the host country, often a business person, who has a strong connection to the country they're representing. They do the job part-time and often for free. They can't do everything a career consul can, but they are absolutely essential for stretching a country's safety net across the entire globe, especially for smaller nations that can't afford a huge network. All right, so last question. Where is all this going? Because just like, everything else in our lives, this ancient institution is getting a radical, high-tech makeover. This transformation is happening on a few different fronts. We've got e-consuls, where you can register online that you're in a country. To solve that problem of distance, consuls now travel with mobile kits to take biometric data for passports in remote areas. And then there's the most radical change of all, the virtual consulate, basically an interactive website that provides services where there's no physical building at all. All of this brings us to one big final question. The consul started as a merchant's problem solver in a chaotic seaport. Today, it's a high-tech, high-stress lifeline. But as our lives move even more online and borders themselves become more complex, what does protecting a citizen abroad truly mean in the 21st century? What the consulate of the future will look like? That's a question we're all going to discover together.